was Sons of Sunday, Running with Angels. You're on 94.9. It is 17 minutes past 4, and it's Tuesday afternoon. That means Creation Ministries International will be the last time this year. And quite fittingly, we've got Dr. John, who is our local Creation Ministries chap, right here, right now in the studio. Good afternoon, Dr. John.
Good afternoon, Mick.
Great to have you right before Christmas. And, hey, we've got a cool story to talk about this week as well. I sent you a link for a story that it wasn't a Christian story. It was just in the newspaper about the star from, you know, the one that the three wise men followed to find above Jesus when he was in the manger. And they're talking about, whether it was a real star or whether it just looked like a star because it was something else. I thought it was a pretty cool story.
Yeah, it was, Mick, and oddly enough, that's what I had intended to talk about today. You know,
okay.
And lo and behold, your email comes through, and but I mean, it's obviously a bit of a somber time now with the events of Sunday, but we all have to move on now, and obviously we're looking forward to the celebration that we have for Christmas.
Yep.
And that, of course, is the birth of Jesus, and the events really that surrounded that we get recorded in the Gospels.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, here we celebrated on the 25th of December, and the Eastern Orthodox churches don't. They celebrate on the 6th of January.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, neither of those dates fits the Bible's description that we get from Luke's Gospel, because Luke tells us that the shepherds were out in the fields at night, and the angels appeared singing to them. Well, December and January in Israel is a bit too cold for shepherds and their flocks to be out in the fields at night. So, at that time of the year, they would definitely have been in the sheepfold or barns.
Yep.
So really, obviously, we don't have the date right, and I'm going to talk about that anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also been lots of investigations into what the real time might have been, because the birth of Jesus really is only mentioned in the two Gospels, Luke and Matthew, and Luke talks about the shepherds, whereas Matthew talks about the star.
Mm-hmm.
And what Matthew talks about, the wise men who saw the star, followed it, and came to Jerusalem to worship what they interpreted as a king being born in Jerusalem. Mm-hmm. So they came along to investigate and to worship him. And because of the star, modern astronomers have tried to nail down exactly what time it was.
Yep.
And that particular article mentioned that there was a comet in 5 BC, and we'll come back to that in a minute. And we know that Jesus couldn't have been born in 1 AD. He has to have been BC,
yep,
because history tells us that Herod was alive at the time. And Herod died in 4 BC. So, and we also know that when he realised that he'd been deceived by the wise men,
mm-hmm,
he then went and executed all the little boys 2 years old and under,
mm-hmm,
because he'd got the date from the wise men when they'd seen the star.
Yep.
So that takes Jesus' birth probably back to 6 or 7 BC.
Yep.
Now, Luke tells us it was at the time of a census, and it was.
Yep.
And of course that was the census that actually brought Joseph and Mary to Bethlehem to fulfill the prophecy in Micah, because Micah said that the Messiah was going to be born in Bethlehem.
Yep.
So, I mean, God had everything worked out. He didn't organise the census, but he knew about the census, and he knew that Joseph and Mary would be going there. So, all of those things fit. But what about the star? And a lot of medieval painters who painted the birth of Jesus, they sort of had in the background a comet. So they must have thought that it might have been a comet.
Yep.
And you would think it would have to have been a fairly spectacular one. Halley's Comet would be a spectacular one, but that appeared in 12 BC. So it couldn't have been Halley's Comet. So was it another comet? Well, the article you sent me suggested that the Chinese astronomers had picked up a comet about that time, and that is certainly a possibility. There might have been a comet around about 5 BC.
Yep.
But a lot of the, and of course, we're talking about people, we call them the wise men, but really that's not what the Bible calls them. The Bible calls them the Magi or Magi, and they weren't exactly, well, they might have been wise men, but they really were astrologers, probably priests believing in Zoroastrianism or one of those things, and gazing at the sky and interpreting what they saw in the stars.
Yep.
Now, where they came from is another issue. I mean, they said they saw the star in the east. Now, they probably came from somewhere like Babylon, which is east of Jerusalem. But I suppose you have to work out how much they would have known about the Jewish scriptures. Well, people in Babylon would have known that very well, because the Jews had been exiled there for 70 years, about 500 years earlier. And when they were sent back to Israel after the exile, then lots of Jews stayed in Babylon anyway. They didn't all go back with Ezra and Nehemiah.
Yep.
And of course Daniel was the third ruler of the kingdom or whatever at the time, and they would have been familiar with both Daniel and Daniel's writings and all of the other Jewish scriptures. So they would have had a pretty fair idea of what was going on.
Yep.
But it's interesting that the Bible mentions they saw the star in the east, but Israel is actually west of Babylon. And some people have said that the east was not the right interpretation of what the Greek actually says, that it wasn't in the east, it was actually in the early rising, sort of in the dawn, that they saw the star. And what was it? Well, there's nothing. What is recorded about that time is a massing of the brightest planets called a triple conjunction. Now, they're not all that uncommon. So whether the wise men knew something more about that than we do, but that's a possibility. The other possibility, of course, is a comet.
Yep.
It could be a supernova or something like that, but there's nothing recorded about that time. Or it could have been a miracle. Yep. I sort of think that it probably was a genuine stellar occurrence.
Yep.
Either a comet or a supernova or something like that.
Yep.
Simply because a lot of people have said the gospel is written in the stars. And even though we don't go along with modern astrology, then certainly, though it's quite possible that God has got a lot of information up there in the heavens that we don't know about. So
absolutely,
yeah.
He created all those stars. Why not use one of them?
He says he knows them all by name.
Yes.
So yeah, it certainly wouldn't surprise me that the gospel really is written in the stars. Anyway, we'll continue on with that when we come back.
All right, you're on 94.9. It is 28 minutes past 4. We'll have a little break and be back with Dr. John soon. Joy to the world. Well, it's kind of a mash-up there. It is 22 minutes to 5, and I'm in the studio with Dr. John from Creation Ministries International. He's been talking to us this afternoon about the evening star. Well, the star that was seen above Jesus when he was born in Bethlehem that awesome night.
Yes, and of course people have been trying to not just identify the star, but also identify the time that Jesus was born, because they've identified some stellar phenomena about that time, but it's still a little bit obscure what the star might have been. But as far as the dates are concerned, as we've already said, the 25th of December and the 6th of January that the Western and Eastern churches celebrate now, that can't really be the correct date. But they have actually been in use for quite a long time. And you often get the accusation that the Christian church just adopted pagan festivals and Christianized them to get the dates. But that doesn't seem to be the case for those, because those two dates are mentioned very, very early on in Christian literature, probably well before the year 200. And I've actually saw it read that one of the popes had set them in the 4th century, but they had been in use for a lot longer than that. And the pagan festival called the Unconquered Sun didn't come till at least 100 years after that. But you wonder where they actually got those two dates from.
Yes.
And there's an interesting little snippet that the early church often had feast days where they were celebrating particular Christian events, and one of those was the Annunciation of the angel Gabriel to the Virgin Mary, right?
Yep.
And they had actually set that date in the Western Church of about the 25th of March, and in the Eastern Church the 6th of April. Now, what about those dates, 25th of March and 6th of April? Well, if you add, has been assumed that the angel Gabriel said to Mary she was going to have a child, and if her pregnancy began then you add 9 months and you get the 25th of December and the 6th of January.
Okay,
so that might be where they got it from.
Yep.
But yeah, it's neither of those could be correct, as we've said before, and it also doesn't bear any relation to the Jewish feast that I mean, obviously we've just had, and only started with the tragic events of Sunday night. But actually, Hanukkah, which is what the Jews were celebrating on Sunday night, that's mentioned in the Gospel. In the Gospel of John, talks about it was the Feast of Dedication, and Jesus was walking in Solomon's portico, and the Jewish leaders confronted him and said, tell us, are you really the Messiah? So Hanukkah gets a mention in the Gospels, but just as an aside.
While we're on dates, we just had a question that came through.
Right.
When and how did BC and AD start? That was from Perry.
Yeah, well, that's interesting, isn't it? It certainly started, obviously, was Christianized, but I think there was a monk called Dionysius who worked out the BC and AD, but he forgot the year naught, because you go from 1 BC and 1 AD is the same thing.
Yep.
But in fact, he couldn't have taken into account all of the information that was available, because, as we said before, Herod definitely died in 4 BC. History recounts that,
Yep.
and Jesus had to have been born a couple of years before that.
Yep.
And if we think about what the Gospels actually say about Jesus when he started his ministry, it says he was about 30 years old.
Yes.
Right? Now, it's often argued what were the dates of Jesus' ministry and when was he actually crucified. Well, it seems that he probably started it in AD 26 or thereabouts. Well, if he was born in 1 AD, then he wouldn't have been 30. So it had to have been earlier than that.
Yes.
But yeah, even the date of the crucifixion is disputed. Some people would say that the dates of Jesus' ministry were from about 26 to 29. Others have said he might have been crucified in AD 30. Some people have argued for his ministry being from 30 to 33. So, really, we just don't know.
Yep.
But I personally favour the starting it in about AD 26.
Does it matter?
Doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter at all.
Of course it doesn't matter, but it's good to have an argument and a discussion about it.
Yes.
But yeah, I think in answer to our question, the BC AD thing was started from a calculation by a monk called Dionysius.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what history says.
Yep.
But yeah, anyway, I had also thought of talking about another interesting article, because Creation.com, which we've talked about before, the Creation website, has had a recent article on the Christian star, the Christmas star, which was why I decided to talk about that.
Yep.
But they've also had a recent one about cavemen that I thought was pretty good too. You know, we're conditioned to think of cavemen as being, part of a particular era of humanity where people lived in caves and used stone tools and all of that sort of stuff. But really, there's never been any of those periods of history that are usually bandied about: the caveman era, the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, the Iron Age, and so on. Those ages, there's no specific time that they were actually occurring.
Yep.
And when you think about so-called cavemen, we know that people lived in caves because there have been remains of campfires and animal bones and that sort of thing, and a lot of artistry, just like the Aboriginal rock art. There's a lot of cave art throughout the world,
mm-hmm.
and people did live in caves. A lot of cave living is actually mentioned in the Bible. Joshua, when he was hunting for some of the kings that he was fighting with, found them in a cave. And Lot, when he and his daughters left Sodom after its destruction, they found shelter in a cave.
Mm-hmm.
David and his band of men were living in a cave. Elijah lived in a cave for a while,
mm-hmm.
and as we know, the Dead Sea Scrolls were found in caves. So even up to the time of Jesus, or just before that, the Essenes, the people who obviously inhabited those Qumran caves. So cave dwelling has been right through all of that period,
yep.
And we're talking about 1,500 to 2,000 years. So it wasn't a particular period. But the other thing, of course, from a creationist perspective, caves didn't exist at the creation of the world. caves were formed in Noah's flood because they're all in sandstone and sediment and so on. Of course, I didn't mention that we still live in caves. If you go to Cuba-Pedy, you'll find people doing just that. But the sandstone caves were formed in Noah's flood. And one of the things that we read about in the scripture is that Noah's flood uprooted all the trees and vegetation. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't much in the way of building materials. Mm. So you would take whatever shelter you could get. Mm-hmm. And if you found a good cave, then you made it your own.
You became a caveman.
You became a caveman. So, it's very interesting what you can actually deduce from reading the scriptures.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But anyway, look, if people are at a loose end over the Christmas holidays, and if they've got any of these questions, they ought to go to creation.com, our website, because there's a search window there and you can type in any of these questions and you'll get articles come up on the site that will most certainly give you a very, very scholarly answer written in layman's terms to whatever question you've got. So I would encourage people to do that over the Christmas holidays. Go on to creation.com.
All right. Well, thank you, Dr. John, and Merry Christmas to you and the Creation Ministries team. It was awesome having you guys this year. We appreciate it every year, and we always learn so much just talking to you.
And we'll be back again next year, Mick, but we won't be starting in January. I think the first date we've got is the beginning of February.
Yeah, look, it's certainly into, I think it's the 3rd of February. There you go. So,
and it'll be me.
Yes, that's right. You'll be back. Then we've got Taz Walker, Ron Nella, Michael Thompson, a whole crew of you guys coming in next year, which will be absolutely awesome. So thank you so much. Merry Christmas. And don't forget, guys, go to creation.com if you've got any questions at all over the break. You are on 94.9. Now it's time for us to check out that traffic again.